So now the router replies back and says, I am 192.168.3.2 and my MAC address is 080003332222. Does any other device in that local area network over here respond? So is anybody else over here going to respond to that ARP request? No, because they don't own 192.168.3.2. Only the owner of that IP address responds to the ARP request with a unicast ARP reply. So notice it's coming specifically from the router, going right back to who? Right back to PC1. So now PC1 receives that, and PC1 says, hey, I just got all the information I need now. That ARP reply is indicating that 192.168.3.2 is reachable using that very specific layer 2 address right here. So PC1 puts that information in its ARP cache for use later on. So that way there, it doesn't always have to do this ARP process every time it wants to talk to the default gateway. It's going to keep it in the cache for use later on. So now that we have the mapping, we can go ahead and finish our layer 2 process. So let's take this packet and let's now encapsulate that packet so it becomes a frame. So here is our layer 2 frame. It has our original app data, our transport layer UDP header information. It has our packet information, which contains the source and destination IP address. And it contains now the layer 2 information with the source and destination MAC address. So let's really analyze what is happening here with the packet versus the framing information. So the packet information says it's coming from PC1. So that's PC1. Going to who? Going to PC2. The source MAC address is PC1. The destination MAC address is who? The router. The router. Specifically, gig 00 on the router. So the source and destination IP. PC1, PC2. The original source going to the ultimate destination. But the MAC address, original source, and then the router's local interface. All right, so now the router receives this frame. And what's the router going to do? The router is going to analyze the information in the frame. The router says, all right, the destination MAC address is this. Who owns that? Who owns that, folks? Take a good look at that. Yeah, that is the router, right? It's the router's interface right here. So the router says, oh my gosh, this is my MAC address. This frame belongs to me. It's intended for me. So the router is really excited because it just received a frame. However, the router now obliterates the header information. That's right. We don't need the frame anymore, do we? No, not at all. Because since the frame's intended for me, I rip off the frame header, and now I look at the packet. And when I look at the packet, what am I looking at? The destination IP, because I want to know, is the packet for me? So the frame was for me, but is the packet for me? And in this case, the destination IP address says it's for 192.168.4.2. The router then says, oh, that doesn't belong to any of my interfaces. So what do I have to do now? I have to do my job. I have to do my job. And what is my job? My job is to forward packets. So the router now has to do a routing table lookup based on that particular destination IP address. So we have our destination IP address right here of 192.168.4.2. And the router looks for the best match in its routing table. So in this case, the best match says that 192.168.4.2 is part of this network of 192.168.4.0/24, and it's directly connected out gigabit 0/1. So now the router has identified that this packet must go out gigabit 0/1. But wait a second. What type of interface is that? It is an Ethernet interface. And when we send packets out Ethernet interfaces, we must create a frame. And when we create that frame, what addressing goes in the frame? a source MAC address, and a destination MAC address. So what's the source MAC address going to be this time? Is it going to be PC1's MAC address again? No, of course not, because it's who is the frame coming from now? The frame is coming from gig 01 on our router. So the source MAC has to be the router's gig 01 MAC address now. And who's it going to? It's going all the way now to who? PC2 in this local area network. So the destination is going to be PC2's MAC address. So the router now takes a look in its ARP cache. Do I have a MAC address to IP address mapping for 192.168.4.2? And let's say in this case, the answer is no. We don't have an entry for that IP address of 192.168.4.2.